Which is the bigger factor driving demand for LNG? Europe shifting away from Russian piped gas, or China, Asia shifting away from coal to gas, you think?
It's a great question. I think it's probably a timing question. I think LNG has been responsible for replacing approximately half the lost Russian pipeline gas into Europe. So the war between Russia and Ukraine has led to a huge, unexpected additional demand for LNG in Europe. That has happened. That additional demand in Europe will remain. But as we look ahead, it's going to be Asia, Asia, Asia. And I think during this decade, it's really going to be China, China, China. These are the long-term structural growth markets.
Europe has at first hesitated at signing LNG contracts that would run for 20 plus years, but then some have conceded. Do you think Europe has definitely made up its mind as to what role gas and LNG will play in its future mix?
LNG in Europe is needed but not wanted. That's what I would say. There was some reluctance to sign long-term LNG commitments, but we have that was particularly, I think, in 2022 and possibly into the early part of 2023. Since then, we have seen Europe step forward and make 15 and even 20-year commitments to that LNG. And if you start importing LNG in the mid-2020s and you sign a 15, 20-year contract, that LNG is in the mix until the late 40s. But so long as it doesn't extend after 2050, which has become a quite iconic date or a quite symbolic date, I think if your contract for supply only goes up into the 2040s, then that is something that companies are prepared to do and which member states are prepared to accept in Europe. So LNG needed but not wanted, I think.
The EU continues to import Russian LNG. In 2022, these shipments jumped by 30% to around 20 BCM, and then remained flat in 2023 at the same level approximately. Will the EU be able to rid itself anytime soon of Russian LNG, you think?
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it, that I mentioned that LNG had played a major role in substituting or replacing lost Russian pipeline gas. But some of that replacement was indeed Russian gas in the form of LNG rather than pipe. So that's remained a significant part of the mix. And as you've said, it grew in the last 2 years. Can Europe rid itself of that Russian LNG? There is a move within the European Commission to move in that direction. But ultimately, this is a decision of member states, of each country, and I don't actually see a willingness or a determination to take that on in certain key European member states.
There seems to be a sense of calm with regards to the gas situation in Europe. Gas demand in the EU continued to drop in 2023, especially industrial demand. This has helped gas prices in Europe to remain subdued and supported the buildup in gas storage, which we've spoken about earlier. Has there been a structural shift, Michael, a structural shift down in EU demand, or is there a risk that demand might potentially bounce back up and reveal the falsehood of that sense of calm?
I think you've put your finger absolutely on the issue there, Nasser. That is the question. It is all about demand. Demand was very weak, and I think many people have been surprised at how weak it has remained for a significant amount of time. My feeling is that we don't know where the equilibrium level of demand is. We don't know what is the equilibrium between price and demand. I think a weakness in price will lead to a demand response. So I think we could have some demand surprises, some demand pressure on demand later this year and into the following year. We should look out for that, absolutely.